Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our weekly shirim on the Ramchal's Adir BaMarom commentary to the Idra Rabbah. And we're entering into a sugya now that's going to take us two or three shirim, Be'ezras Hashem. But in spite of the technicalities of the sugya, it's very important to focus in on the details because while the Ramchal is externally teaching about the way in which the worlds unfold, and the emergent process from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light into physicality. On the interior, what the Ramchal is also describing is a process that's taking place cognitively, that's taking place within the mind of each and every individual. So all of these tikkunim and all of these rectifications and the balancing act between Arich Anpin, which is the light of unity, and Zer Anpin, which is the light of disunity, we're not simply speaking about ontological realities, where it's something that's happening outside of us. But what the Ramchal is pointing out is that this is an internal psychological, psycho-spiritual process that is taking place within the self as well. So when seen only through the lens of the outside, so it seems esoteric and removed, and the question is, what value is there beyond learning the words of the tzaddikim? But when seen through the inner quality of what the Ramchal is being masbir, in addition to the value of learning the words of the tzaddikim, we find that we are witnessing the process in which consciousness comes to light. And by witnessing the process in which consciousness comes to light, we also learn the delicate tools offered to us by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in their Idra Rabbah to learn how to be metaking consciousness, to learn how to fix the way that we think, to learn how to reorient ourselves properly enough so that we can grasp the inner light even prior to its revelation. This is the purpose. The purpose of this Sefer of Adir BaMarom is that the Ramchal is teaching us that in spite of the fact that all of the tikkunim and the fixing is only going to take place in the future when we return back to Gan Eden and we eat from the Eitz HaChaim and there's going to be binyan Beis HaMikdash. Nevertheless, for those who tap in, and each person has the ability to tap in according to their level, the conjecture of their chachma in their mind and the chachma in their heart, when we tap in, we begin to realize that we're still by the Eitz HaChaim, and we never left the Eitz HaChaim. And all of these future orientation points that we're yearning towards are also accessible in the here and now. This is how we begin to live the future in the present. This is the light of Pnimius HaTorah. And so the Ramchal, after introducing us to the concept of Arich Anpin, and how Arich Anpin is really just the externalized case that holds the inner light of Atik Yomin, and how that light of Atik Yomin and Arich Anpin, that light of Keser, descends downwards into the worlds of separation to ensure that all disparity and all disunity always remain unified. Now the Ramchal is going deeper based on the Idra Rabbah as to how exactly the moichin, the consciousness, the mindfulness, the content of the mind, how it descends from a place of Arich Anpin down into Zer Anpin, what the process is, because obviously if we're dealing with processes, you can't just say it goes directly down without going through the various vessels, because we can't say that, because that's what Shvira is. Shvira is the denial of the systematicity of the process in which Moichin come down. It's the desire to just have Moichin immediately without going through the process of all of the partsufim and their interrelationship. The process of tikkun rectification is the balancing act and the structure that enables the light of infinitude to express itself down within the finite vessels without overwhelming the finite vessels. And therefore, we have to pay close attention to the process in which these lights come down. So the Zohar Kadosh says as follows: Umehai Gilgalta, from that skull of Arich Anpin, Natif Tala, there is a dew that drips down, lahahu dilabar, and it extends itself down to that place which is considered outside, which is the territory of Ze'er Anpin. And this dew, this morning dew that descends down each and every day from the skull of Arich Anpin, fills the mind of Zer Anpin for that day. As the pasuk says, Sharoishi nimlatal, that my head, meaning Zer Anpin, conscious awareness, receives the fulfillment of its mind from that tal, from that dew that descends from above to below. Umehahu tala de anhir meresha, and from that tal, from that light of Arich Anpin that descends down and drips down into the mind, hahu deihi lebar, yet arun masyal almadase. As a result of the dew that descends down from Arach Anpin and fills and saturates the mind of Zer Anpin will take from that dew and give it over to Malchus, and Malchus is considered that which has fallen and died. It's the aspect of the body. And it's this tal that comes through Arach Anpin, through Zer Anpin, that illuminates the light of Malchus again in the secret of Tchias HaMesim in the future. As the pasuk says, "Shareishi nimla tal," my mind is filled with tal, is filled with dew. Melesi tal lo ksiv ele nimla. It doesn't say that it's a pre-original or a pre-situated fulfillment of dew, but rather there's a hint that there's an extra level of dew that descends down as well. Because as we're going to see, there's two expressions of dew from above that are going to descend down into the mind. There's the regular structure of the dew that descends down each and every day into the mind of Zer Anpin. And then there's that extra secretion of light that comes directly from Arach Anpin through Zer Anpin, but for the ultimate purpose of Malchus, and that's a secondary type of dew. That's a dew that's capable of Tchias HaMesim, not the regulated moichin of each and every day, but the extra special illumination that comes all the way from the top to illuminate the very bottom. And with this, the pasuk says, "Kital oros talecha," that your lights are like lights of dew, or your dew is like the light of dew. Orot nuhura de chavirta da atika. This light is the unified whiteness of light that is being drawn down from the chavirte of Atika. And so we're going to see what's happening here through the lights of the Ramchal. Zakta Helig Ramchal. The Zohar says, Mehai Gulgalta Nafis Tala. That from that skull, that place of Archanpin, that place of luminosity and unity, there's a dew that drips down because the purpose is for it to influence below. In Ibinyan Hazayish Sodos Gedolim Ma'od, there are very deep secrets here. B'tira sheb'idjarab zuta hizkir inyan hatlas reishin shalo hizkir bakan va'ata afarish l'chatam kol hadavar ma'elu. And in order to understand this very deep secret, says the Ramchal, we have to address something that's not addressed here, but rather is addressed in the Idra The Idra which is the Giloy of the Zohar HaKadosh, not of the Idra Rabbah, but the Giloy that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai reveals on his day of death, which reveals not only how all beginnings come from Keser, which is what the Idra Rabbah talks about, but the Idra talks about the structural process in which all of the levels come about from Keser. The Idra Rabbah, what we're learning, is teaching us how the influence of Keser is always present, and how all lower levels are receiving that illuminated light. The Idra is how exactly that's happening. That's why in the Idra there's a focus on Abba v'iman, Chachma v'bina, which is the mechanism, the in-between that allows the light of Keser to be drawn down into Zer Anpin. In the Idra Rabbah, we don't have a focus on Abba v'ima. We're talking about the unique relationship between Keser and Zer Anpin. Even though there is a structural process in which that happens, that's not revealed yet. We just have to learn in Idra Rabbah about the fundamental relationship between the levels. And so here, says the Ramchal, even though it's only in Idra that we begin to understand the structural model of how the light of Arach Anpin is being drawn down into Zer Anpin, which is referred to as the Tlos Reishin, the three heads that occupy the skull of Arach Anpin. Nevertheless, for the sake of what we need to discuss, we're going to come upon these three heads. Now, we've discussed these three heads before. These three heads represent the core of what the Arizal is bringing down, and the Kamarna holds on to this, and the Ramchal holds on to this, and the Leshem holds on to this, and the Gra holds on to this, and Chasidus Chabad holds on to this as the fundamental space in which the Ikar light is going to be coming out. That there's three heads in Keser. The three heads are as follows. There's Reisha Delo Isyada, the unknowable head, which is the tippy top element of consciousness. That represents the loftiest point, that point of unknowability. Then beneath that is going to be a Keser, which is referred to as the Golgalta, which is a place of calmness and oneness and unity. It's associated with Arach Anpin. It's associated with the illumination of unity. And then the third head is going to be the Moichas Tima'a, the concealed mind. Now, the concealed mind that exists within the Golgalta, in spite of the fact that it's still operating in the place of pure consciousness, nevertheless, the Chachmas Tima'a, the concealed mind of wisdom, even prior to the emergence of actual wisdom and knowledge, becomes the space, the incubation territory in which the beginning process of disintegration and differentiation begins to take shape later on in the Olam HaAtzilus. The Gulgalta, that middle level of the mind, that light of Keser, that's related to reality as we're going to see, but it is not the source of reality. Reshad Lois Yada, as we're going to see, the even higher head has a different way of revealing itself. It's the lowest head of Chachma Stima'a, of that concealed form of emergent wisdom, which is the beginningness of the possibility of forming patterns that will eventually be revealed by way of differentiation down below. It's within this space of Chachma Stima'a that we begin to see the first instantiations of eventual existence. This is not what the Ramchal points out here, but this is why that the Moicha Stima'a is associated with Butsina de Cardenusa, which is the Gevura of Atik Yoimin that rests within it, which is the emergence of the possibility of differentiation prior to differentiation. Now, everything that takes place within this Chachma Stima'a, this lowest mind of the Gimel Rishon that fill the skull, the Golgalta of Arich. So obviously we're talking about the most refined spaces imaginable, but nevertheless, the radical secret of Chachma Stima'a is that because it's the lowest level of the highest levels, so it already contains within itself all of the eventual unfolding particularized details that are going to be present in the lower levels. There's no separation at the level of Chachma Stima'a, there's no differentiation yet, there's no constriction. That's the added miracle of what takes place in the Chachma Stima'a, which is the emergence of the possibility of differentiation prior to the actualization of differentiation itself. And specifically because this Chachma Stima'a is going to become the source of the unfolding Seder HaHishtalshelus in the world of Atzilus, so it contains within itself all of the potentia that is eventually going to be revealed. Now, what we know of the unfolding worlds of reality, below the level of Chachma Stima'a, as we enter into the world of Atzilus, where we're dealing with the Seder HaHishtalshelus that we have accessibility to. So we know that the secret of Tikkun is that things now operate according to a scale of balance, a mitgala, which is referred to as cheder. Cheder stands for Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. There's a right side of Chesed, of expansivity, of extension. There's the left side of Din and constriction. And there's the middle pillar of Rachamim, of compassion. Now, these three orientations that will eventually be disclosed within the worlds of separation are already present within the Chachma Stima'a, in the secret of the three Shems Havaya that exist there. That there's the Havaya on the left side, there's the Havaya on the right side, and there's the Havaya in the center. And it's these three Shemos of Havaya that orient within the Chachma Stima'a that eventually begin to be the roots of revelation. Now, the Zohar Kadosh, it's very delicate here, and it's very important for us to be able to focus in on the particular points we're trying to make. Generally speaking, when we look at the three Roshin, we look at the tippy-top mind, which is referred to as Reishad Lois Yada, the unknowable head, that level of illumination that is so illuminated that it's beyond the system itself. Then there's the Gilgalta, which is the light of illumination that's graspable, that's the Keser. And then within the Gilgalta is the Chachma Stima'a, which is the emergence of particularization. The nature of the Reshad Lois Yada is so lofty that it doesn't express itself as a mind. It expresses itself in the secret of Malchus. We've spoken so often about the secret of Malchus Hagnuza Biradla. That Malchus, which is the lowest space, which is receptivity, which is not something that's expressive of itself, but rather something that is receiving that which is being expressed into it, is oriented towards that quality of Malchus and Nekeva and reception and Din. Now, the first place in which the possibility of Malchus begins to emerge, the radical secret of Malchus, is rooted in the upper space of Reshad Lois Yada. Like we've said multiple times from the Ramchal, that Malchus is rooted in the Or Ein Sof. And Malchus has a unique relationship with the Or Ein Sof to the degree that it is a reflection of the Or Ein Sof itself, Kaviyachol, the Malchus of Ein Sof, Kaviyachol, which is Ani Rishon and Ani Acharon. Whenever we talk about Reshad Lois Yada, it doesn't enter into the conversation as a mind. It's too lofty. The only way that Reshad Lois Yada has any actual representation in the organized system of reality is by expressing itself by way of spooky action at a distance within Malchus itself. And this works for us because ultimately, anytime we have a chesed, a din, and a rachamim, the three masculine elements of hashpa'ah, right, left, and center, the triadic structure of all dialectical expression, right, left, and center, there needs to be a vessel that's receiving that light. Because for there just to be light itself, that triangulation of right, left, and center, if there's not a receptacle that's ready to receive that light, so then it's going levatala. So then that hashpa'ah from above is not going to have a place in which it can settle. Malchus is the lower vessel that has the ability to receive the light of the chesed, din, and rachamim that's expressed in the three forms in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself. And the original development of that vessel is expressed in the light of Reshad Lois Yada. And so it turns out then that when we look at the moichin of Chachmas Dima'ah, and we look at the three ways in which the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be revealed, Reshad Lois Yada cannot be considered one of the minds because it's in fact the source of the kli, which is the recipient and the receptacle of the mind. And what happens is that in order to make three minds, which are necessary, so we have to come upon the fact that in between the Golgalta, which is the upper part of Keser, which is that light of illumination right below Reshad Lois Yada, between that light of the Golgalta and the Chachmas Dima'ah, which is that origination and development of eventual constriction, there's a hidden middle pillar which enables for those two polar opposites to be unified together, and that's referred to as the Avira. That air within the mind, that cavity within the mind that enables for there to be a fluid movement between the Golgalta, which is the light of Keser, and Chachmas Dima'ah, which is the eventual expression of concealment. So what happens is now is as follows. Reshad Lois Yada doesn't enter into the conversation because it becomes the source of Malchus that's going to be the receptacle of the Gimel expressions of mindfulness. And once we lose Reshad Lois Yada, we're left with only Golgalta and Chachmas Dima'ah. In order to effectuate that triadic structure, as well as to create a bridge between the Golgalta and the Chachmas Dima'ah, which are, at least at this level, two opposites, because the Golgalta is the light of unity and the Chachmas Dima'ah is the beginning of din to a certain degree. So there's a secret third pillar of the Avira Dachya, which is the rarefied air that allows there to be a column of air, so to speak, that connects the light of the Golgalta with the Chachmas Dima'ah. So now we have three moichin again. We have the Golgalta, which because Reshad Lois Yada has been taken out of the picture because it's going to be the source of the receptacle, becomes the highest mind. Then there's the Avira Dachya, which is going to be the intermediary space of Das that connects that light of expansivity with constriction. And then there's going to be the Chachmas Dima'ah, which is the beginning of concealment. And then Reshad Lois Yada goes all the way down and expresses itself as Malchus, which is going to be the receptacle to those three first elements. So now let's look at what we've just discussed in the words of the Ramchal. There's two things that we have to understand and keep in mind when it comes to the light of Arich Anpin, when it comes to the light of Keser, when it comes to that lofty parts of Hashem's revelation of unity. There's two roles that it plays. The first role is Mashu Shoresh Lamashe Yatsa B'chol Ha'atzilus. That it's the foundation and the root source of everything that's eventually going to unfold within the worlds of Atzilus, which are going to be the worlds of graspability, which are going to be the reveal worlds of that which we have a relationship with. So the first thing is that Arich Anpin is this lofty, idealized space of Keser, parts of that is so distantly removed from our minds, but nevertheless, it's the root source of all of existence, and existence is going to come about from it. And in addition to the fact that it becomes the site in which existence unfolds, the second element of Arich Anpin is Mashu Poya Lefi Hanhagaso Hapratit, Hu Hanhagas HaChesed Shemachsir HaKol LeChesed. So in addition to the fact that Arich Anpin is the loftiest site in which the eventual emergence of existence is going to take shape, because as we said, from within the Chachmas Dima'ah, which still exists within Arich Anpin, is going to be the emergent qualities of existence. That's only the first element of Arich Anpin, where it becomes the site from which all eventual existence takes place. But that's not the only purpose of Arachanpin. Arachanpin is also parts of Bifnei Atzma. Arachanpin is not just the womb of being, it also represents a particular form of being itself, and that needs to be established as well. And that light of Arachanpin is not the way that existence emerges from Arachanpin, but it's the purified light of chesed and goodness and illumination and kindness that is always present within the expression of Arachanpin. That needs to be there because for that to do its work, it has to have its own orientation. The goal of Arachanpin is not just the descent downwards, but Arachanpin is its own light. And that light of Arachanpin, which is its own, which is the chesed, it needs to be cultivated and it needs to be understood because it's that place that enables and ensures all of existence to perpetually return back to goodness, to ensure that the Hanhaga of Arach Anpin, which is not just the emergence of existence from within Arach Anpin, but its own most functioning, that's all of the tikkunim of the Gulgalta and the Panim that shine forth downwards that we're learning now. That there's one way in which all of existence comes from Arachanpin, and there's another way in which Arachanpin is motivating the entirety of existence by way of shining its own most light onto it. And while the emergence of existence from within Arachanpin is discussed mostly in the Idrazuta, the illumination of Arachanpin down below into the worlds of separation is discussed here in the Idrab. Now, with regards to the element of Yitzias Ha'atzilus Me'arach Anpin, which is explained in the Idrazuta, that's not written here, but it's something that we have to discuss. That's what we've been discussing. And the secret is as follows: Sod ha'inyan, ki letzorech zeh netaken arach anpin begimel reshin. For the ultimate purpose of the eventual emergence of the worlds of Atzilus and separation from within the illuminated space of Keser. So arach anpin needs to situate itself in the triadic structure of how the worlds are eventually going to reveal themselves. And those three minds are Reshad Lois Yada, that we said is the highest mind, the Kitra, which is the Gilgalta, which is the second intermediary mind, and the Moichas Tima'a, which is the Chachmas Tima'a, which is the lowest mind, which is the emergence of constriction. Aval Eila Na'asim Dalid, but in truth, these three minds become four. Because like we said, Reshad Lois Yad is too lofty a light, and it only becomes the hidden roots of the vessel, which is the receptacle of these lights, which leaves us theoretically with only two minds. And therefore, there has to be an emergence of a third mind, which is the Adir Dachya. The reason for this is that Daval Elu Nasin Dalid, these Gimel transform themselves into four. Ki Atika Kadisha Atzmuhu Arach Anpin Netakin Begimel. That Arach Anpin itself, devoid of that illuminating light of Reish Lois Yada, which is too lofty, that itself breaks down into a subset of three heads, which are the Kitra, which is the Gilgalta, which now becomes the uppermost head after Reish Lois Yada is taken out of the picture. Then the Avir Dachya, which is that intermediary bridge that connects the two opposite realms, which is going to be the middle brain. And then the Moichas Tima is going to be the lowest expression of those three Moichin, which is going to be the emergence of the world of Atzilus. This whole secret is explained elsewhere. It's a very, very deep secret. But for now, says the Ramchal, it's important for us to only focus on what we need to focus on in order to see the sugya unfold in front of us. Because the sugya that it's unfolding in front of us is as follows: the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu fears the Welt, the way in which all of existence appears to us, is going to be in accordance with the triadic breakdown of the three categories of chesed, din, and rachamim. The light, the concealment, and the unity between the two of them. Or Ein Sof, Tzimtzum, Kav. Chesed, Gvura, Rachamim. Chachma, Bina, Das. Kohen, Yisrael, Levi. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Shachris, Mincha, Mariv. These three expressions are fundamental to the entire Seder of the Ishtalshalis. And we're going to see, and as we've seen, it's reflective over and over in the Seder Ishtalshalis. When you look at the Spheros, what we're seeing is this very same pattern. There's Chachma Bina Das, then Chesed Gvur Tferes, then Netzach Hod and Yisod, and then Malchus is a reflection of Reish Lois Yada. So we see that the entirety of existence is shaped and modeled after this repetitive structure of Chadar, of Cheder, of Chachma, of Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. That's the klalus of the hanhaga. That's why there needs to be three moichin. But in addition to these three forms of chesed, din, and rachamim, there needs to be a makabel. There needs to be a makabel, there needs to be a receptacle that's capable of holding this light. We see this reflected in the fact that there's the Gimel Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but then there's the Regel Revi'i to the Merkava, which is David, Malka, Mashiach, because that's the fourth quality that fulfills the entire purpose. Because without Malchus to be the receptacle, then the light of Chadar is not going to have any place to go. And therefore, so we have three moichin, which represent the chesed, din, and the rachamim, right, left, and center, and the receptacle, which is going to be the way in which the general hanhaga, the way that Hashem reveals himself, is going to be expressed. And these four stages correspond to the Shem Havaya, the essential root source of all things. Baruch Hu. So we see then that the Kitra, which is the Gilgalta, which is the second mind, which becomes the upper mind in our conversation, is going to be the chesed. The avira and the moicha are going to be the din and the rachamim. Those are the three stages of the mind. And the reisha de lois yada is going to be the shorish of the makabel, the beginning nature of malchus. So we see that it's yud, hey, vav. That the kitra, which is the gilgalta, is the yud. The avira is going to be the vav that connects the yud and the hey. The moicha is going to be the hey, that's yud, hey, vav. And the reisha b'loas yada, which theoretically would have been the tippy top head, now extends downwards and becomes the shorish the makabel, which is the hey, which is in the secret of malchus. And this is one of the deepest secrets of reisha b'loas yada, that expresses itself dafka down below. But what we have now is that arranged for us is we have the model of the way in which existence is beginning to take shape. The gimel ration, these three minds of Gilgalta, Moicha Stima'a, and the Avira Dachya that holds them together, become the root source of the Yud Hey Vav, of the Cheder, of the Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, the three forms in which existence is taking shape. And the Reisha Delos Yada extends down the line and it reveals itself as Malchus, which is going to be the fourth, that's Makabelit, which is going to be the secret of Eishes Chayla Taras Baila, and how that which is below is going to ascend above, and the secret of Evan Masa Abanim Haislorish Pina. Zok the Heiliger Ramchal, the Soid Hagimel Reishin Nispashtu Abba Ve'ima Umazla B'Soid Das Beneim V'Oid Chabad Deza V'Oid Chesed Gevura Teferes V'Oid Netzach Oid in Yisoid V'az Yitzah Es Nukva B'Soid Reisha L'Os Yada. Not only that, says the Ramchal, but this setup, this original setup of the structural reality of existence, which needs to reveal itself by way of this triadic structure of right, left, and center to create this balancing scale. This doesn't just represent the beginning of the expression, but this is the reiterated process that expresses itself over and over and over. That these three moichin of the Gilgalta, the Avira, and the Moicha are going to reflect themselves in Abba Ve'ima and the Das in between the two of them. That Abba Ve'ima are going to be Chachma and Bina. Chachma is going to be rooted in the Gilgalta, the Keter, and Bina is going to be rooted in the Moicha Stima'a, the Chachma Stima'a, that source of constriction. And Das is going to be rooted in that hidden pillar, that inner middle cycle of the Avira Dachya, which is referred to as the Mazla. The Mazla. Because as we're going to see, the Mazla are the tikkunim of the beard, which is the way in which Chachma Stima'a begins to reveal itself down below. But suffice it to say that we see that the same triadic structure of the three moichin that begin the light of Arach Anpin express themselves downwards afterwards in Chachma, Bina, and Das, and then that expresses itself in the Moichin of Zar Anpin, where we have a Chachma, Bina, and Das, and then it expresses itself downwards in the Chesed, Gvura, and Teferes, and then that expresses itself downwards even further in the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod, reflecting this principle of the three, and then the fourth, which is the secret of Reisha Loas Yada, is the Nukva in the secret of Reisha Loas Yada, the Malchus Aganuza Biradla. Now, all of what we're talking about, the beginning and the origination of this Seder HaDavarim, these three moichin, because spirituality operates as a fractalized form, so every mind is going to contain these three principles within it. And the main place that we're going to have to access is going to be the Chachma Stima, the Moicha Stima, the lowest mind. Because it's the lowest mind of these upper three minds that eventually begins the process in which infinitude expresses itself down within the finite. Because the Moicha Stima is the shorish of the Gevura, of the Butzina, the Kardinusa, of the potentiation of differentiation, even prior to the possibility of differentiation. This is the main way in which of Chesed, Din, and Rachamim are going to begin, dafka within the mind of the Chachma Stima. And Zakta Helegram Chalvihi an Inyan Hazeh, Shall Hispashtus Cheder, Na'aseh b'chochmas tima'a. Now, the process in which the emergent properties of existence begin to extend downwards, the structural development of reality, which is going to be built into this triadic structure of left, right, and center, right, left, and center, that takes on its deepest shape in Chachmas Tima'a because the lowest level of the higher level becomes the highest level of the lower level. And so we see that it's Chachmas Tima'a that is going to be the engine, the place in which these three pillars of existence are going to begin to take shape. V'ha'inyan, says the Ramchal, Kiba nechlalen gimel reshin elu, besod yud hey vav, b'miloi alfin, yud hey vav, yud vav dalid, hey aleph vav, which is the gematria of Tal. And so Zok the Ramchal, that what's happening in the Moichin of Arachanpin, what's happening in the Moichin of Chachmas Tima'a rather, is that we're beginning to see how the eventual development of the triadic structure of the world is going to emerge, and therefore that has to be hinted to in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu expressed in that place of the Moichas Tima'a. And the Moichas Tima'a has the Shem Havaya. And the Shem Havaya of the Moichas Tima'a, because it's eventually the source of Zer Anpin, which is the Shem Havaya b'milei Alfin, which is the Ikr Shem, because Chachmas Tima'a is the beginning of that process, so Chachmas Tima'a also has the same Shem. It's Havaya b'milei Alfin. But like we said, it doesn't have its Malchus yet. It doesn't have that last Oshei. So all we have is the first three letters that are beginning to be expressed and that are beginning to rumble out of existence from within the Moichas Tima'a. And that's the Yud, Hey, and the Vav. And when spelled out fully, accordance with the Milui of Alfin, it's Yud Vav Dalid, which is Yud, which is going to be the light of the Keser. Then there's going to be the Hey, which is Hey Aleph, which is going to be the light of Moichas Tima'a, of Bina. And then you're going to have that innermost quality of Das, which is going to be the Vav, which is Vav Aleph Vav. So those are the three emergent qualities of the Moichin that are now going to begin to express themselves downwards from within Chachmas Tima'a. And this is the Tal, because Yud Vav Dalet, Hey Aleph, Vav Aleph Vav is the Gematria 39, which is the Gematria of Tal. These Moichin that are saturating in the mind of Chachmas Tima'a, which begin to emerge downwards into Zer Anpin by way of Abba Ve'ima, by way of Chachma and Bina, is the Tal that comes down from the world of Chachmas Tima'a and expresses itself within our consciousness. This dew, this morning dew that is revealed each and every day, Roi Shinim Le Tal, that the head is filled with the dew of the day, the moichin of the day, that is the Shem Havaya of Alfin that's coming down from the Chachmas Dima of Arach Anpin and extending itself downwards into the moichin of Sar Anpin. So that dew that's giving life, that's awakening us, is in fact a secretion and an unfolding of a light from within the upper echelons of that active intellect of Chachmas Dima, which is rooted in the mind of God, Kavyachol, which is the light of all rightness. It drips down into our mind and it begins to fill our mind with Tal. That Tal, the gematria of Tal, is Yud Hey Vav, Yud Vav Dalid, Hey Aleph Vav Aleph Vav. And this is the secret of the Chachmas Tima'a that then brings it down through Das so that it can extend itself downwards to the Nukva, which is going to reveal itself in the secret of Reish Loas Yada. So the Ramchal is now continuing to tell us that even though the Moichin and consciousness emerge from Chachmas Tima'a, which is the beginning of constriction, which is the beginning of din, which is the beginning of limitation, in spite of the fact that it's rooted upwards in a place of non-limitation, then lest we forget that in truth there's an added element going on here. Chachmas Tima'a might be the beginning of the eventual differentiation that creates the worlds of Atzilus, but it is not the starting point of the emergence of the light. The starting point is the Gilgalta. The starting point is that light of Keser. The starting point is that light that surrounds Chachmas Tima'a. Chachmas Tima'a is the lowest element of the highest, but it's contained within the highest level of the highest, to ensure that in spite of the emergent constriction that is eventually going to come from the reality of B'tzina de Kardenusa and constriction, it's always going to be mitigated and transformed by the innermost quality of the Keser, which is light of Chesed, which is light of goodness, which is the fact that Choy Katoiv Lehetiv. So Zakte Hele de Ramchal, Acha Kitra hu asoida Delgalta Makefes is a Chachmas Tima. We just spoke about how the Chachmas Tima is the shorish of the Tal, of the dew of consciousness that's going to emerge within the mind of Zer Anpin and the way we relate to the world. But we can't forget that surrounding the Chachmas Tima'a, surrounding that inner kernel of thought that begins the process of concealment, is the expansivity of the surrounding light of the makif of the Gulgalta, which is light of Keser. V'zesod gadol hamuskar be'idrzuta, and this is a very deep secret that's referred to in the Idrzuta, in the language of Hai Atika Sabed de Sabin Kitra Ila Ela de Me'atrin Beikol Itrin, that in spite of the fact that there are lower levels of the crown, which is the crown of Chachma Stima, which is the emergence of consciousness in its constricted form, nevertheless, there's a greater crown that surrounds it entirely, which is the light of the Gulgalta. We understand deeply. We explained already how the Keser, the light of Keser, the light of the Gilgalta, is the presencing of that which is above down in a space that is below. So typically we look at descending down as a removal from the place of above. But Keser is the light of drawing down the light that is above and bringing it into the territory of below to reveal that the light of above is in the territory of below, and the territory of below is saturated and subsumed and only a vehicle for the light of above. That's the light of the Keser, that's the light of the Gilgalta, which is always shoire. It's always resting itself upon the Chachma Stima'ah. Chachma Stima, the emergence of din, is never, God forbid, left alone. It's always being mitigated and directed by the innermost quality of Keser, which is the Chesed Ilah. This is the secret of the Keser Hazeh HaMakif Es HaChachma Stima, that this innermost quality of the Gilgalta, of Arich Anpin, which operates for itself, which is that light of Chesed, not the emergence of the worlds of separation from Chachma Stima, but the light of the Gilgalta that surrounds the Chachma Stima, we see that Nimsa Makif is called Ha'atzilus, that in truth, even though the beginning of existence and Atzilus is going to emerge from the Chachma Stima'ah, the Chachma Stima'ah itself is surrounded entirely by the light of the Gilgalta. So it turns out that the entire world of Atzilus and all of the constriction that we're going to encounter is in truth saturated by and subsumed by the light of the Gilgalta, which is the light of Keser. Ki kvar shamata eicha kol yotzim min ha'chachma stima'ah b'soid ha'tlas reishin ha'ela. Because we've already explained to you and we've seen how all of the moichin emerge from within Chachma Stima'ah, the eventual Chesed, Din, and Rachamim that is going to compose the entirety of existence, is emergent from that innermost place of Chachma Stima'ah in the secret of these three minds, which is the Kitra, which is the Gilgalta, which is the Avira Dachya that enables the connectivity between that light of Gilgalta and Chachma Stima'ah. And it's specifically for this reason, be'emes l'tam zeh nish'eres ha'chachma stima'u mukefes min ha'gilgalta kula liot chesed da'arach anpin shoylit al kol ha'atzilus u'machziru elav v'aven hetiv. And because all of existence is emergent from Chachma Stima, it's specifically for this reason that Chachma Stima needs to be surrounded by the Makif of the Gilgalta, because the Makif of the Gilgalta is that secret of the Chesed of Arich Anpin, which is going to express itself throughout the entirety of Atzilus, ensuring everything restores itself to goodness at all times. So we see that the beginning of existence, the Tal of Zer Anpin, which becomes our consciousness, is emergent from Chachma Stima. But Chachma Stima is always going to be surrounded by the light of Keser, which is the Gilgalta, which is perpetual goodness that seeks to reveal itself at the core of each and everything, and to reveal the light of Tainug within Bina itself. And we have to understand and we have to understand that this light of the three moichin of Yud Hey Vav spelled out in the fullness of the Aleph, which is the gematria of Tal, which exists within Chachma Stima, it expresses itself downwards by way of the Mazla, by way of Das, by way of the tikkunim, by way of drawing down that beginning of constriction into the worlds of existence. And those moichin extend themselves down until it comes to the place of Zer Anpin. And that's the moichin of Zer Anpin. That's the consciousness of Zer Anpin that is emergent from within the innermost quality of the Tal of Chachma Stima'ah. And at that place, it becomes the Yud Hey Vav, it becomes the Chachma Bina and Das of Zer Anpin. So it's exactly like we're saying that consciousness, our ability to face today, to download consciousness for today, is rooted in the light that exists within the Chachma Stima'ah, which is surrounded by the Gilgalta, which is expressive of the light of Atik Yomin. And that's the Tal that comes down to fill the mind. That's the active download of the day. In addition to that, in addition to the drawing down of the light from the Gilgalta into Chachma Stima'ah, where those three mochin then extend themselves downwards into Chachma, Bina, and Das until it settles within the mind of Zer Anpin. That's only one expression of the do of Arich Anpin. But in addition to that, the light of Arich Anpin that stands on its own, which is the perpetual light of Chesed, that has another way of impressing itself upon reality. It's almost like an in case of emergency break glass type of system where even though there's an organized way in which Hashem is revealing his light, there's also going to need to be a hidden undertone of a light that is rooted fundamentally above an Arich Anpin without having gone through all of these processes of constriction to ensure that when a nace needs to be performed or when goodness needs to be restored, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can reveal that light, which is the secret of Tchias HaMesim. So the first form of the dew of the mind is going to be those three moichin that descend from Chachmas Tima'a into Zer Anpin. And then there's going to be an additional element of Arich Anpin in and of itself, which is the light of the Gilgalta, which is always ensuring the goodness of existence, that's going to send down an extra light. And we saw this already by the Dalet Chavirtin, that there's a light that descends down from Arich Anpin all the way, and it goes all the way down to Malchus and Zer Anpin, and it reawakens over there from the light of Keser itself. Those were the Arba Meo Shekel Kesef. So Zakta Heliger Amchal, Amnan oid or echad nimshach min hachachmas tima'a derech hasa'arus me'achori ha'arif. Not only is the tal coming from chachmas tima'a through the moichin process and emerging within the mind of Zer Anpin, there's also a secondary mode of influence, which is the hairs that cover the back of the neck, which descend from Chachmas Tima and emerge directly within Zer Anpin itself. And that light that comes from the outside comes and illuminates the light on the inside that just has been drawn down. This light is not a light that slowly but surely extends itself downward by ways of the Tzimtzumim and the Mazla and the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna from the Chachmas Tima. But rather, this is the bond of connectivity that enables the moichin of Chachma to unify with the moichin of Zer Anpin. This is a secondary revelation. And this is the light of Chachma that comes and knocks from the outside and awakens the movement on the inside. This tal, this dew is not the consciousness of dew. This is not the download of the morning dew for the day. This is the dew that comes from an even deeper place, from the Gilgalta itself, from the light of Keser, the light of Tchias HaMesim, meaning to say, this second form of dew is not the slow and steady structural development of dew that descends down into the mind from Chachmas Tima, from Tza. There's a secondary dew of Tchias HaMesim that is perpetually dripping down by way of secrecy, immediately from above, without that slow and steady gradational process. But that's the drip drop of nitzchias, of into zman, of the light of the Eitz Chaim into the Eitz Hadas. And this is what it means when we say Mehai Gilgalta Nafif Tala. There's also a dew that descends from the skull of the Gilgalta itself, not the dew that comes down by way of the structural development from Chachmas Tima'a, but a secondary light of dew that comes to fix the whole system. It's the light of Arich Anpin. It comes out of the hairs of Arich Anpin. It doesn't go down through the beard of Chachmas Tima'a. It comes out directly. And this is the light, the drip drop of that dew that comes from all the way above to give Tchias HaMesim at all times. And this tal is referred to as tal oiris. This is the light of tal. This is not the tal of the moichin. This is the tal, the dew that illuminates my moichin, because it's from the secret of the Gilgalta, and it shines forth in the secret of the Chavirte. And this is the secret of Roishi Nimla tal. It's not that my mind is filled with tal. That's the first form of tal. That's the Yud Hei Vav from Chachmas Tima. That's the establishment of developed moichin. This is Roishi Nimla tal. It's a drip drop that doesn't go in accordance with the system, but it breaks the system and it reveals the light of goodness that's present everywhere. Because had the Zohar, had the pasuk says Maleti tal, the head is filled with tal, so then we would have thought it's the tal of the Chachmas Tima'a. That would have been the moichin. That would have been the download of consciousness for the day. But nimla tal is the secret of that extra form of dew that is dripping down from Keser itself, ever reminding us that the structured nature of our minds and our preconceived notions that emerge from Chachmas Tima'a are not the end-all be-all, but rather there's a light of Keser that is always ever present within it. And these are the two forms of dew that we're going to continue to discuss, Be'ezras Hashem.